Hello.
Hello.
Good morning.
Morning.
Did you get my email response yesterday?
I did, thank you.
All right. I hope that clarified.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what our sort of near-term goals are.
Oh, it's under our control. Certainly not my individual control. So there is, in fact, I think a prioritization exercise may be necessary.
Mhm.
And also, I'm just looking at the volume of work ahead of us, and I'm thinking that we should today discuss maybe forming a number of subgroups to go tackle these individual issues.
Mhm.
So we can maybe talk about what those subgroups are and what some of their individual sub goals are going to be. Maybe try and document that. Where are you located?
New
Hi,
York.
Mark. How are you?
Okay. Oh,
Hello. Yeah, I'm in New York.
Nikolai, hi. How are you?
Good to see you.
I'm just gonna give people a couple of minutes to join.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon.
Nikolai, which company do you work for? I now forget.
Nikolai, Canary bit. Let me actually, you
Oh,
usually
Canary
write it.
Bit, yes.
Yeah,
Remember.
Canary.
We
There you
just
go.
had Manu show, and then there he is. Okay. We're gonna wait for a few more minutes for people. I'm just gonna give 2 more minutes, and then we'll start. So next week is RSA, and I do not know if we're going to get enough attendance. I'm going to ask the mailing list to see if we should hold next week's meeting or not.
Well, it's very early on the West Coast, so I was
6
planning
a.m.,
to
yeah.
attend because it's
Yeah.
before the show anyway.
Right.
So
But also people party the night before.
some do, yeah.
I don't go to RSA. And my boss will be there. By the way, I told him to find you, Manu. I don't know if he will.
Cool.
But your last announcement about your messaging app, I forwarded it to him and basically said, take a look if you want to talk to them,
Who-
please.
Who's that?
Well, his name is, he goes by Davis. His full name is Michael Davis.
Okay,
And he's very technical. So
cool.
if you find it, it's a big guy.
Cool.
Okay, 6:04. Well, I don't know how many more people are gonna get joined, so I guess it's gonna vary by week. Oh, guys are hi. 2 people. All right, cool. Okay. All right, so there are a couple of things I wanted to talk about. One was IETF, but I guess this is your Geshe's wheelhouse, so I'm just going to wait on him to show up to speak to that. And This is, let me do this. We'll probably need a scribe because I cannot both talk and write. I don't know. I don't know how anybody does that, but so in the chat, I'm going to put the link to the meeting minutes. So feel free to add yourself to the list and write down anything that you might want to note from the meeting today. All right. So I've been contemplating sort of the amount of work ahead of us in, as part of this work group. And it's vast. And as a result, I do not know, I have ideas about how to organize this, but one idea is we simply decide on a priority order, and that's one option, and then we just together go through that and figure it out until we're exhausted and we feel that it's done. Another mode is that we form a number of subgroups and perhaps don't tackle everything, but maybe go in parallel and figure out individual things and then get together as subgroups, arrive at perhaps their drafts, and then have those integrated into the reference architecture. Or maybe there's something I'm not thinking about, so I kind of wanted to go around the room and sort of spend the next few minutes just thinking about how best to organize ourselves. Feel free to start talking, I guess.
Spontaneously, I would say that, well, going in parallel will get us there, might get us there faster, but depends how large this group is, because, okay, today we're, so how many, 9 seems to be. We might not have enough quorum in each of the subgroups to go fast enough. So it might actually slow us down.
Any other takes?
My take is, I think we may want to narrow the scope a little bit, or may be focused on at the priorities that are, or the things that are very specific about confidential computing.
Yeah.
And then plan not, I know that we want to hit and we want to be at IETF in July with something, so we should focus on a deliverable. First contact, but I think we should plan, nothing moves super fast at the ATF anyway. So I think we should plan over 2 or 3 meetings and just say, okay, what is the first thing that we deliver in July? And then what do we plan for the next 2 meetings after that, for instance? That would be my recommendation.
Okay, fair enough. Any other opinions?
Can you hear me right now?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was struggling with an unmute button. I would just add that not sure how long it's going to take us, but as we have the requirements, almost ready to go, maybe it's good to create like a skeleton stubs of the areas that we want to divide and conquer the architecture documents into. Still work with them sequentially, I guess, but have them out there in GitHub, in Google Docs, wherever, so that when the discussion takes us somewhere in the vicinity of the other topic, just note them down so that we are not losing progress as we go. Okay.
Yeah, that's sensible. All right. So unless there are other opinions, I want to then perhaps discuss this. What I would call the big rocks. I do not know what you call it in your business, but effectively the big rocks would be the sort of what you just said, the big chunks, that we need to address. Hopefully, largely orthogonal to each other, so we could, that they could be developed independently. Now, speaking specifically to IETF Madrid, what we discussed last week was that, not a decision cast in stone. I want Yogesh to be here for it too, because I think he volunteered to drive it. But because our requirements are fairly certain at this point, we could present our requirements again, but as an informational draft, and perhaps put some additional meat on the bones. So that might be sort of the bare minimum, but if we can get more in by the time the deadline comes to submit the IETF draft, then maybe include that as well, and then we can decide perhaps that may impact our priorities as well. But as far as big rocks, so let me state a small number of them, and then see if you agree, and then perhaps also add your suggestions. So the first big rock for me is the verifier/IDP integration. Right, so where we talked about how today you contact the verifier and you get back at reference values. Sorry, you submit reference values, you get back attestation results. But attestation results are specifically not credentials. So a mechanism for integrating the attestation results with credentials issuance, like what that looks like, how to think about it, how to document it. Could we do a prototype of that in maybe one of the clouds, maybe in Azure, maybe in Google? That would be sort of one, right? So that would be one big rock, and I can put sub bullets under it. The second big rock that I believe we need to address is provenance. How to guarantee that the provenance is present in the credential, and the mechanisms for dealing with provenance. So as I said, we already talked about how there can be a real-time mode and an auditing mode, and how basically we need to specify the mechanism. So I looked at Salsa, I looked at Entoto, and they talk about things like bills of materials. So that's good, but that's, by the time you get to that, you also need to worry about, why was the credential issued? What was the policy, right? So the policy might be, no high severity vulnerabilities at the time of issuance. And that could be the, you need to audit the fact that this has taken place. And again, not final decisions we can talk about, but basically the sort of the provenance, I mean, cradle to the grave. Of issuance and handling verification. So again, that's again, that's another big rock there.
And by the way, Mark, I think the two are actually so the first one that you said, the integration with identity, right, and credential issuance and the provenance, the two are connected because you need the identity of the different actors, right, or the CI/CD pipeline and all that stuff to be able to assert that in the credential. And so I think the two are correlated very, very strongly.
Okay, so I just added that as a bullet point. I do not want to double click on it yet, but I noted it. Okay. So so I do not know if I want to put it under verifier IDP integration or not, but it could be a big rock in its own right. So whether it's a bullet or a sub bullet, but that's a combination of payload attestation with platform attestation, because they are in fact different. So it's something that the RATS RFC does not handle, but it's a real world deployment requirement. So I need to know where my physical server is located for various governance reasons. And for that, I might use TPM attestation. But defining a mechanism where payload can basically say, I am, I am this payload, but also I'm running on this server, and how to join these two into one credential. That would be like I said, as perhaps additional claims in the credential is a pretty significant need, which again we need to figure out how to address. So so I guess I'm going to put it right now as a sub bullet under verifier IDP, but it's a pretty massive one. Integration of payload with platform attestation.
You mean workload, right?
Well, so yes, it's just in the governance documents we talk about a payload, which is I guess we should call it workload. Yes.
Mark,
Integration
one
work.
thing, Mark,
Yukesh,
one thing I
hi.
wanted to, hi, Mark, one thing I wanted to ask is what should be, is there a specific thing we want in the attestation results from the attestation verifier as a kind of requirement before we say that the credential is issued based on that information? Are we
So
going
that's part
to,
of that's part of the whole verifier/IDP integration bullet. So if you're watching
okay.
what I'm typing into the
I'm not able to see the, okay, let me see if I have
just
to
click
change
on
the
the meeting
screen now.
minutes and go under the suggested
Okay.
topics. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just gonna put the topics that are no longer suggested. We're discussing them. Okay, so outside of verifier IDP integration and provenance, the next one I think is a big rock. Maybe not something we tackle immediately, but eventually I will put reverse proxies. Because if your identity needs to flow through an intermediary, and sometimes there are multiple, we need to at least explain how it's done or discuss what the options are, and again, the entire process. So today somebody just goes and issues a certificate and to the reverse proxy, and it terminates TLS and whatnot. But for continuous computing, that's not going to be sufficient. So I wanted to make sure we have it somewhere in our like big rocks. I suppose if I open up the reference architecture doc, yeah, workload migrations is another big rock. So yeah, workload migration is another one.
100%. I was about to going to say that workload migration, and that changes a bit of a ball game because then the bonding between the workload and the platform changes based on migration. So how are you going to fit in those two conflicting requirements, or how would you join that?
Well, so yeah, I already made a suggestion for how to do it. I just don't know how to operationalize it yet.
Okay.
We can talk about that, but perhaps at a later time. So those are the big four. We can always add more to this list, but I think for my personal take is, but if I'm forgetting a big rock, please add one. Maybe compound, or what do we call them? Composite or aggregate workloads. So if you
Composite,
have
well, yeah, we said
composite
composite.
workloads, yeah. So composite workloads. So this is CPU plus GPU
Sorry, this is
plus
Hank. I was
smart
joining
NIC.
late because I'm on vacation, but
Hi, Hank.
I can't see where you're working on, and I don't know which doc. I was looking
Oh,
at
we are on the
most
meeting minutes document right now.
meeting minutes. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just right. So, okay, what we're working on right now is we're trying to figure out what the sort of agree on the list of big rocks we need to address, so that we can then decide how we want to do it. Either we do them sequentially as a group, or we're going to separate into subgroups and then go, address the, these
Right.
things,
Yeah.
and then integrate them later. So I'm okay personally with either model. So, but those would be okay. Now we have 5, and there are sections now in the reference architecture document for all of them. We already talked about short and long-lived workloads. So real quick, I'm going to start sharing my screen for a minute and just show you a little bit of work I did. Should be able to see my screen now. But in the reference architecture, there was a little section on workload lifetimes, and we talk about some workloads are long-lived and will be able to obtain and renew their credentials because they're running for a long time. And short-lived workloads are the ones that simply will overload your verifier and suffers significant performance penalties if every invocation for a second or two, whatever they do, it requires its own credential issuance. So this is where I added this swim lane diagram. So there is a provisioning mode where you go request credentials from the IDP, and then you seal them to the platform. And then you start the same workload, but now in operational mode, where you unseal the previously sealed credentials and go authenticate with it. So it's a very, very simple swim lane. But I added it. Feel free to edit it if you think something is incorrect. But that section is, probably something we can now move past. All right. So of the big rocks that we just listed, which ones do you guys feel need to be handled first? And let's maybe just dive into that. Or do you feel that we can, do a couple of them in parallel? I don't suggest we do all 5 in parallel.
I think like I'm curious, like you're one of the, let's say, few ones in this forum that represents a kind of a potential user. Let's put it like that, yeah. Because the others are development companies or technology companies.
Yeah.
From your perspective, are all of these equal priority, or does one of them have a higher priority?
I think the highest priority from where I'm sitting would be the integration verifier with the IDP, because there is no workload identity without credential issuance.
I think that's a good place to start as well, because the other topics, they're quite fun, quite technical. Workload migration, that's really cutting edge. We have some work on it ongoing, but it's not there yet. While the other, like this verifier IDP integration, it's kind of there. It needs to be done first. While other things are technical and they're appealing, but I think they can wait.
No, that's perhaps fair. Now, I would say for heavy workloads that require like machine learning training inferencing, your composite workload bit will probably be hot on the heels if you're working across providers. So one of our scenarios also is we would like to work with the SaaS vendors and entrust some of our data to them and not risk. So you want to say work with Snowflakes or Databricks or Wiz, whatever. How do you know that the very sensitive data you give to them is not going to leak from their processing, where it's still our problem when it happens, right? So, it's
but for example, if you take this like CPU GPU SmartNIC, the TIO support was just very recently introduced in the kernel. It's very fresh, doesn't have that much else support throughout the stack. So for example, it's we will need to work on it, but it can still wait a little bit. It's not like you're going to deploy that tomorrow. While some other parts might be more relevant, more urgent.
Yeah, and I would claim that for the Verify IDP integration work, the people I would hope to handle the bulk of it would be the identity and attestation people at places like Microsoft and Google, because ultimately, that's where the majority of the sort of the brain power, the horsepower lives. But this is I'm actually I was on Microsoft campus yesterday making inquiries about who I might want who I might want to solicit to join this effort, and hopefully I'll be successful.
So Mark, I agree that the integration with the identity provider is critical, but I do believe that composite workloads and provenance are very closely tied topics, because the way that we gonna deal with identity needs to include the types of identities for other types of entities or other types of actors.
Mhm.
And the composite identity challenge is indeed the chaining, right? Making sure that the bindings between different sub-workloads, for instance, or different actors or entities or workloads that are cooperating together, that
Yeah.
chaining is as strong as the binding with the platform itself. And so I think those three topics are closely related, but I agree with you that the umbrella name is the how do we start by, with the integration with the provider, the identity provider, or what is the mechanism by which we assign or create identifiers and identity.
Right. So, and look, we're like working in the real world where people will have different approaches. It may make sense to start by documenting different options, and then we can perhaps attempt to either prototype them, or we can, hopefully we'll have people from Microsoft, Google, etc. On this call, and again, we have folks here from Intel, IBM. Maybe some people who are closer to implementing verifiers and implementing IDPs can suggest which ones of them are better or worse, and then we can basically, maybe rank our recommendations, saying you can go this way or can go that way. So here's one example. So maybe we should start just drawing swim lanes and interaction diagrams effectively for different options. So one option might be you contact verifier, you get back attestation results. You take attestation results to IDP, and you get back credentials. So the advantage, of course, is that you can use existing verifiers unmodified, and you can teach your identity providers. Maybe you talk to your identity provider is a CA, and you give it, a CSR, and in the CSR you include your references, your attestation results, and there is a kind of a CA plugin, and it does a thing. So that could be one interaction diagram, and it gives you back a certificate. Another one might be your verifier also acts as an IDP. So you submit your reference values to the IDP, so to this verifier IDP combo, and it gives you back your credentials. So you save a round trip, but at the expense of combining two pieces of functionality. And again, I mean, Microsoft needs to tell me, or Google needs to tell me, which way they're more likely to go, and that would become the winning option. So one of it, like as I said, the first deliverable could be a document listing different options.
Just highlighting that I had the task to give a background check model application. You just did. You're giving the IDP/verifier all your evidence, but that's actually the IDP. So the verifier could also be not the IDP. It could relay it to the background check verifier, get the attestation result back, trust that, and then issues to the attester who came with the reference values or the evidence applicant, with the evidence from the attester, and returns that. So that scenario where the IDP has a background verifier is a background check model. Right?
Okay. Oh, fair enough. So as I said, we can basically start developing, writing down these interaction diagrams that basically say, this is what these are the players. These are the messages they exchange, and then we can specify perhaps the formats in which various bits flow, or the choices there. And ultimately, the proof is in the pudding. Like hopefully somebody from like a major cloud service provider that we can work with that would implement one of these models, and that then we'll have the proof that this really can work. I mean, with code you can make anything work, but then eventually you need to deploy it in a cloud at some point.
And there may be multiple options. Like, yes, you can call somebody some option as a winning option, as you said, Mark. But for different use cases or different settings, you may have 2 or 3 options. And
Yes.
Yeah, none is a winner. For a particular use case or a particular deployment, one option suits better than the other. So
Yeah, for sure. We can still leave options on the table. I'm just saying code talks. So whatever gets implemented is probably going to see greater adoption in the short term anyway.
yeah.
So I would put that, I would put that as a task. And again, feel free to assign this task to you. Similarly, we could try and brainstorm how do we integrate workload attestation with platform attestation. And again, Jagannathan, you have your hand up.
Oh, hi. Yeah. So I was curious about the IDP. So is the identity provider going to be a service as part of the cloud, or is it going to be a publicly available server like Let's Encrypt?
I think all options need to be listed and let the market decide ultimately.
Okay. Yeah, it feels as if it has more value to integrate with a third-party identity provider.
Yeah.
That way, the cloud provider is not the one who vouching for the identity of the workload.
Right. So this is what good architecture is. It consists of architectural building blocks that can be composed in various ways. And the way they're composed is through this concept of a workflow. So if you think of verifier as a building block, an identity provider as a building block, then you can basically define what each of them do individually, and then you can basically say, one model is an attester talks to the verifier and gets results, and then the attester talks to the identity provider as a second leg, and that's one model. Another model is the attester. The workflow is, things go to the verifier, then to the identity provider, come back to the attester. Yeah, that's another option, but the building blocks are the same. Manu.
Yeah, in theory, I agree that, architecture and building blocks are, the way to go. In practice, though, we are, as the CCC, as the, the ground truth, reference architecture, anchored in hardware at the chip level, I think not all implementations are equivalent, because when we start composing different blocks, you want to make sure that any block you put in the chain or in the decision process to actually result in the decision of whether or not to collaborate with a workload or to connect to a workload, the confidential computing piece is going to be the most secure component by orders of magnitude compared to anything that is not leveraging confidential computing. So I think a reference architecture coming from the CCC should be advising, what is the, smallest attack surface, what is the least trust, what is the, the reference, implementation, the best selection of building blocks. So while I agree that, we should be able to compose anything, I disagree with the concept that various implementations would be equivalent. If there is a North Star, we should identify it at the CCC.
Fair enough. I have a flurry of thoughts on that, but that's probably not best discussed just yet. But in principle, I agree with you that we should specify the right way of doing things, and then I would also see situations in where someone may need to relax some of the
Absolutely, I
scripture
agree. Yes,
for their
yes,
practical.
absolutely. I think this is exactly the right way to do it, is to say this is the optimal, and then you can relax constraints, where you need to live in the real world. I think that's the concern. You're thinking real world. I agree with you. As the CCC, we should show, the way. And I
Yeah.
think Yogesh has his hand up.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think how I see is in similar to what we have in the rats, we can define roles, and rather than blocks like, hey, this is the attester, what is supposed to do, this is the verifier, and this is the identity provider, those kind of roles, and then how do they interact between, and then we can frame up the architecture. And then we can say, okay, in a particular deployment, this IDP and the verifier can be combined, and we can go like in that direction where we define the roles clearly. What is your feeling about that?
Certainly, yeah. What you just called roles, I call architectural building blocks. My one criticism of the RATS RFC is that it did effectively nothing on actual as a specification, right? So it doesn't say attestation results, take this shape or look like this, and that actually makes downstream work a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, but that's what other documents are for, like RATS ear, RATS A4Z. These are the downstream documents, right?
Yeah. Well, then perhaps ours is going to be one of the downstream documents, because certainly we need to be compliant with the RATS RFC. I see no problem with that. I just want to make it possible for somebody to implement our architecture, not just follow it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Sure, I agree with Mark. Yeah.
Okay. So is it possible then for our next meeting to draw some number of interaction diagrams, perhaps one that has a verifier and an IDP on it, perhaps one where IDP is a CA, maybe one that issues JOTs, and then perhaps also draw diagrams that indicate how, or at least first draft of something that shows how your workload attests with the verifier, but also your platform attests, perhaps using a TPM, and then the two results are combined. At least, have a draft flow that we can look at and critique.
Yeah, so this is Hank. Of course, I'm raising my hand for the background check model where the IDP is the relying party, and I think CA is an easy goal, and the verifier is in the background.
Mm-hmm. So would you then draw these?
Yeah.
Okay.
As best as I can. So we have actually we started drawing something like that up a few weeks ago. I have to find that again in the ASCII flow madness. And so we already also had a key broker in that diagram. I don't think we need that here right now. But sometimes to then get the workload and get it running, you need more keys than just for the confidential part. I guess it's confidential because I encrypted workloads, but I think that's overload. For now, I will simplify it and try to have it next week. Yeah.
Now we should probably try and be comprehensive here, and also. So, for instance, let me give you an example why I say maybe important to be comprehensive. So one option is you create a key, like an asymmetric key pair, and then you go and create a CSR and you get back a certificate. Like that would be one. But another model might be that you use your attestation results, you go to an HSM and you get back a certificate, right? That is perhaps not ideal because your certificate is now in multiple places and the key risk leaking and all of that, but it is a real world option. And as a result, I think it makes sense for us to basically draw the different mechanisms, perhaps put some sense of which ones we consider more secure, but still leave people with an option of which model to choose from.
Makes sense. So I will at least provide one. Yes, on the background check again with the IDP and verifier.
Well, so I think the goal needs to be to be again comprehensive and list as many. Like it doesn't have to be all in 1 week. right? But we should still have sort of a library of models that we have discussed that we don't have to redraw every time, and you know, then have discussions with all of these options on the table. Okay, so with 20 minutes remaining, I want to switch gears right now. So I think so far what I hear we've decided is we're going to tackle the Verify IDP integration first. We're going to draw a number of interaction diagrams between them. Separately, if you have connections inside of major CSPs, pull on them. I'll myself talk to folks from Microsoft and Google. Yeah, if you're at IBM or an Oracle and you have your own gurus in the identity space, perhaps go consult with them. So that will be our next week's discussion. Will be around these different models, and ideally we should probably start drawing them in the same format, like whatever we discussed last week. What was it? Creating diagrams, mermaid. So maybe try and standardize on an encoding mechanism. Yes, Jack Nathan.
Yeah, hey Mark, since you just mentioned a thought popped into my head. So what I was thinking was, aside from the diagrams that Hank and others are going to put together, the cloud providers who want to use the identity can also put a diagram together with their expectation of how the identity is going to be integrated with their workflow.
Yeah.
Maybe we can also discuss that to see, hey, so should we need to address this separately, or does this fit with one of the existing models?
Yeah. So that's the thing. I don't see folks from Microsoft and Google on this call today. So again, I will be reaching out in the background to maybe Keith Moyer from Google, maybe a good person to talk to. And I have a couple of contacts with Microsoft that I will also want to ping. But we will need them at the table to tell us, what's realistic. Well, Ariel, you and Google, maybe you can ping IDP people there. So,
yeah, I mean, I've already started. Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, great. So I want to switch gears now and talk about IETF Madrid. So, Yogesh, before you joined, I actually didn't want to have this conversation before you joined, but we briefly touched on it, and we need to have a firm agreement on what it is that we are presenting at IEF Madrid. The last time we spoke, it was going to be basically our requirements repackaged. I mean, in a sense, I already presented our requirements. It wasn't an informational draft. This was part of the reason there was pushback. But is there something else we should also include in the initial informational draft that we submit?
I think, as I mentioned, I briefly touched last time when I hinted that if we can use some real world use cases, like which is coming from the industry, in addition to the requirements, that would be helpful. That's my personal view, but I would like to hear feedback. I thought we had a broad consensus last time that we should add some good number of use cases in the first draft to say where our requirements are relevant and why we are tackling this separately or within the CCC.
Yeah. And then we should also illustrate in the draft how it's compatible with Whimsy architecture that exists today. And if there are unavoidable points of difference, then we should highlight those as well. So for instance, like provenance is something that Whimsy architecture doesn't tackle, and we can draw some attention to it. Have you any updates on the deadlines so we can agree on some sort of a work back schedule against those deadlines?
I think it's a very standard practice in ITF. You have a cutoff date for submitting the draft, and it would be sometime in June. So we have the rest of the April and May to work on the draft. And
So
maybe
sometime in June, are we talking June 1st, or we're talking like a month before the IETF? So it would be like
it will
June
be
19th.
maybe in the mid-June, I think. Yeah.
Okay,
Between 10.
so
So
okay,
the
so
cutoff date for publication to the IETF 123 is July 7th. So we should
oh
have
wow,
something stable before, like 2 weeks before, so we can polish a bit and make it presentable and publishable mainly. But the cutoff date for internet draft submission is July 7th.
Okay, so it has come out. When I checked last time, it wasn't. Glad you told me. Yeah. Okay, which means we have a good amount of time to polish stuff, but ideally we should be ready by mid-June so that we can make some final edits in the last 2 weeks before submission.
okay, so July 7th is a Monday. Going back 2 weeks, as Hank said, for Polish is the 23rd, which is also a Monday. Since we're meeting Tuesdays, let's say that our internal deadline for a draft that would need only small tweaks then would be June 17th.
That's a good goal for now, I think.
So I'll call it a good draft. Maybe not perfect draft, but June 17th would be a good draft deadline. Okay, and working back from that, do we need to set any additional milestones? I would say let's agree today on the broad structure of this draft. Because again, we have 15 minutes. That should be enough. So at least what are some of the main sections we want to cover, and we'll still have time to change that. But I would say requirements need to go in. We already talked about use cases. I'm not talking about stuff that's required by ETF, like security considerations. Like I'm assuming the required bits of the draft are there. But if we're talking about requirements, use cases, what else do we want to? I would say differences from Whimsy.
Key distinction from IMSI.
Yeah, key distinctions. So we can highlight those. What else?
Yeah, well, 3 is the golden number, so I would say at least 3 different data flows between the architectural building blocks to compose them, to show the composability, which of course requires beforehand definition of additional building blocks. So the architectural building blocks have to be defined as derived from the use cases, which have requirements derived. And then there's a derivation of building blocks that are needed to satisfy the requirements, and then show at least 3 options how to compose them, based basically, hopefully even on the use cases actually, so they can circle back to that, so they're better understood. That sounds like a good start.
Okay, so data flows between the building blocks corresponding to use cases.
Yeah, the best case for use cases, again, I often see that's always a hybrid between use cases and such. But if the use cases set the context for the reader, that's really helpful because they then intuitively better grasp the resulting flow.
Okay, and I think this is a nice sort of synergy here. If we're going to be drawing our interaction diagrams for next week's meeting, then they can also be used by the RFC. Nikolai.
Yeah, we might be introducing some new terms. Of course, we must try to reuse the old terminology from other RATS documents, but we might be introducing some new ones, so we should not forget to have potentially a terminology section.
Good point, actually. Most of the time we would try our best to reuse terminologies either from other groups, as you said, the RATS group for attestation and the Whimsy group for workload identity related terminologies. But if even after these 2, we that there are something new popping up, we should definitely clarify in this document.
Okay.
The-
I will also note that in another hour or two, no, in 2 hours, the attestation SIG today is also taking place, and they're every other week. So I very much want them to participate in that effort, because there's such a big part of attestation to all of this. So I don't know. I looked on YouTube. I could not find a recording from last attestation SIG. For some reason, it didn't make it to YouTube. Certainly a few days ago. So they were talking about what the next things they are going to be tackling, that they were supposed to be discussing it last week, but I couldn't attend. So I'm gonna ask again today if maybe somebody on the call today has been to the last attestation SIG meeting, but we need to collaborate with them. I guess that's a no. Do you want to say anything else about the walkback schedule from deadlines, or is that enough for now?
Before we move on,
Yeah.
just something I just thought of. I think it would be good to wrap up the doc with like a future section, so that the work group who is going to review that knows what we would be after. Like, I mean, I'm assuming the in scope, out of scope is part of the requirements for the doc, but it will also be good to end with, here is where we're at and here is where we plan to be. And maybe without a timeline, but give them a sense of at least the order of how we want to approach things, so that if they want to join together, they will know when to plan for an intercept with us.
Okay, I'll put future section with a question mark, just to know what you said. We may end up doing that.
Fair enough.
Okay. Anything else for today? I don't want to hold you longer than we can make productive.
Just a volunteer-ish question. It is common to compose a internet draft on GitHub using some CI tooling that renders or creates internet drafts, edit versions and such for you. Where do we want to do that? Or if you want, do we want to do that? And I hope so. If so, where?
So I messaged Rian twice now, and I got a message that she's out Friday and Monday. So I asked for, what GitHub repository we should be using if we're going to use GitHub. But I guess folks who have created IETF drafts, what is the best authoring mechanism? Let's just use that.
So Mark, yeah. So Henk, as Mark suggested, we were trying to get a location in the CCC area itself, but in the background, I had created one draft in my private repo, though it's called private, but it's public, and I think I shared with Mark.
Yeah. So why don't you put the link in there? We can start using that right away, and then once Rian gets back to us, we can migrate to,
Okay.
the one that's hosted by the consortium.
Yeah, I will share that after the call. I'm pending from mobile, so
okay.
But I will share that, and then we can add it and add the diagrams and whatever you have, the bullets.
Yeah, and so this mermaid tool, is that good for creating swim lanes?
I have used it for block diagrams. I have used for message sequence charts as well. And activity diagrams can be well created in the mermaid.
Okay, so activity diagrams are not the same as interaction diagrams. Like I specifically mean swim lanes. Can mermaid create swim lanes?
I need to check, honestly, Mark. Yeah,
okay.
I don't know.
Well, it needs to. It's pretty important, so we don't have to waste time redrawing using different tools. We need to figure out what our diagramming strategy is going to be. So, if you could maybe take it upon yourself to, just look at available tools and make a suggestion, and we need to agree on that pretty quickly.
Sure.
Yeah,
okay.
For that, unfortunately, IETF has a long backwards interoperability requirement, so it goes back to text RFCs. Unfortunately, that puts a restriction on how to create SVGs or more elaborate diagrams. And you can't just implant a mermaid diagram in an RFC. Unfortunately, today, you have to draw a certain ASCII art that is then transformed into an SVG that is rendered more elaborately in HTML RFCs, for example. So the minimum input for IETF IDs, unfortunately, still is ASCII art.
Are you suggesting we draw ASCII art?
No, but you highlighted that we don't want to redraw, but I'm afraid we have to redraw once if you want to put it in ID. That's what I'm saying. But
Is there a
think
tool that can
designing
take
this
like
would matter.
SVG and render it as ASCII art that we can then submit?
Yeah, if it's close enough, we just this is an assistant tool. You have to mostly always put some hand work into it, manual work, labor into aligning the resulting ASCII art. But yes, we can. I think Mermaid is a good start. But when we do the IETF stuff, we will have to do maybe some assisted conversion or transformation, and then we are very good.
So am I hearing that we'll start using Mermaid for now and hope to make it work?
Basically, what Hank is saying is, even if we start with Mermaid, at some point somebody has to take an exercise to convert them into ASCII art and then insert it into the draft.
Okay, how much labor is it converting things to ASCII art? Is it like, it renders it and then you make a few manual changes, or do you have to walk around the screen with a cursor and, do this Manu?
But I would ask Hank and Yogesh, you guys have done this work before. Is there another pipeline, a tool that is easier than ASCII art that converts easily to ASCII art? What is the commonly used tool chain to do that kind of work? Or do people actually do ASCII art?
I have used one tool. Let me figure it out.
So what I have done is to use ASCII Flow. That's a free internet service to quickly redraw the mermaid, export that into an ASCII file, and then manually adapt it so it's ASCII input for an ID. That's the best I could do today. There's no good automatic transformation.
Okay, but I heard that Mermaid was part of that tool chain, so Mermaid is the right starting point.
So the Mermaid we design with, because humans can draw Mermaid like a language, and that's great. And so it's a great design tool. But in the end, I have not found a good conversion between those two representations.
Okay.
Okay, we will have to bite this bullet. If you guys can, I think let's try to use ASCII Flow and see if we can draw in SVG and change it to ASCII Flow.
So the first tool we'll be using is ASCII Flow, or the first tool we'll be using is Mermaid? Like, what's the flow? Mermaid, ASCII Flow, ASCII art?
Mermaid accessible to all is not trustworthy. So everybody can participate. So I would always start with Mermaid because I think it's the least entry threshold, low learning curve.
Okay, and it does swim lane diagrams.
And exactly. And it does create diagrams, and then we go from there. We have to find out a good way to make it an ID.
So we'll do that, but if somebody can quickly come up with an alternative, let us know, okay?
Sure.
All right. Unless there's something else, we can wrap up for today. Again, thank you for taking the time to join us and for your inputs. And next week, we'll be discussing interaction diagrams.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good. Goodbye.
Take care. Bye-bye.